Here to discuss this breaking news with us now, Rhyen Staley with Parents Defending Education. Rhyen, good to have you with us.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for having me, sir.
This is you're joining us at a good moment. We intended to talk about this expected executive order. The president apparently just signing it moments ago. What does this mean for schooling in America?
It's going to mean it's going to take a challenge here to rid this stuff out of the schools. But it's a great step in the right direction. Returning the focus back to definitely a colorblind mentality, and that to treat them as individuals, because what the CRT type of stuff has been doing in the classroom is teaching kids to judge each other based on their skin color, immutable characteristics, and stereotype people. I mean, really, it's all the opposite stuff that you and I grew up being taught in schools.
Right. Yes, no, it's pushing racial bigotry. So on one hand, you've got that, and then the other piece is this radical gender ideology stuff. And you heard inside of the executive order, the president is forbidding schools from teaching kids that they were born in the wrong body, which unfortunately has taken off in our country.
Yeah, I'll give you one example. Chicago Public Schools sex education program. The entire curriculum, if you look at it from pre-K through to sixth grade, which is what we have evidence of, it really is a methodical movement from teaching the kids pronouns at an early age and the body parts where they've renamed them, all the way to fifth grade where they're starting to teach them about puberty blockers and things like that, and that they're born in the wrong body. And so, this stuff needs to get out of school. It's really destroying the kids mentally, and it has no place in our schools. This stuff that's based on what they call queer theory is just destructive in its nature, and I believe it's intended that way.
Yeah, it sure is. I think you're exactly right. And in terms of the other executive orders the president has signed on this issue, just yesterday he signed an EO headlined "Protecting Children from Chemical and Surgical Mutilation." This is obviously on the same topic, but forbidding the use of federal resources to do these grotesque mutilations on children. It's what the shocking thing, of course, Rhyen, is that we even have to get to this point where the president of the United States has to declare reality to exist.
Well, with all this stuff, and it's really interesting how none of this stuff a few years ago, according to people on the left, was happening. None of this. CRT was not happening in schools. In fact, Representative Jasmine Crockett just said it like a year ago that this stuff was not in schools. And yet here we are, the president has signed executive orders to ban it, and they're freaking out about it, and they're getting really upset. So I find that interesting. But what I will share with you and your audience is this stuff is actually in school too. The gender, the gender affirming care stuff, the kids getting access to puberty blockers. It's very quiet, very under the table. It's there. As far as I've read the executive order on the chemical mutilation part, it only pertains at the moment to federal funding. But I will also tell you that there is billing going on to things like Medicare and Medicaid over this. So at least it's a start. It's not perfect, and nothing ever will be per se. But I think that it's a necessary step in the right direction, and then we need to just keep pushing for these things to end.
Yes, well, it's a start insofar as it relieves Americans of the burden of endorsing this garbage without their consent. That's what was happening. We're funding this with our tax dollars, and it's a horrifying situation to realize that the money that's being pulled out of your paycheck is being used to abuse children. President Trump at least getting started an effort to correct all of this.
Absolutely. I think we need to continue to drive home the part, and the evidence is showing, by the way, and you and I know this, and your audience probably knows this too, is the evidence is starting to show things that are common sense again, that doing things to young children's bodies is destructive, whether it's physical in this particular case or mental with the CRT and queer theory part of it, that we've just been unleashing real havoc on children in the last couple of years. And now, and credit to all those that have been working the last couple of years to expose this, that that we've finally gotten to this point where, even people on the left, for liberal friends of ours are agreeing that this is bad stuff. So I think it's finding common ground.
Yes.
Vince, we did polling recently that showed that upwards of 70 to 80% of parents across political spectrum do not support any of this stuff.
Meanwhile, as all of this Marxist garbage has been pushed in the schools at the expense of our children, actual educating is apparently on the slide, because we've got new information today from the so-called Nations Report Card that comes out of the National Center for Education Statistics, a U.S. government body, which found that our nation's eighth graders are currently at their lowest literacy ever recorded. Lowest literacy rates ever recorded. 33% of eighth graders nationwide are functionally illiterate. What am I to make of this finding, Rhyen?
Well, number one is we spent over $190 billion plus on COVID recovery, and obviously negative movement. So there's that part. I think one of the things that I'd say is we maybe zoom out a little bit, and numbers are abysmal. We've definitely got an issue with education in terms of educating. But the biggest thing to zoom out on is the fact that the gap is widening actually between our lowest performers and our highest performers. And that's also a cause for concern, because we were sold with this equity stuff and CRT, et cetera, that we had to implement that to close the gap between these groups. And unfortunately, in the last four years, it's widened actually. And so that's something to kind of grab a hold of and look at this. And, our worst performers got worse. They got worse. And that's a real pause, especially our neediest students, Vince. The students who special ed, have learning disabilities, they got worse. And I think we really have to ask some tough questions. Why?
Yeah, and that doesn't bode well for the rest of your life. I mean, you ask any kind of researcher on this who understands the value of literacy, if you are incapable of reading, that means even by third grade, if you can't read, you are destined to a very difficult life ahead of you. We are setting students up for failure based on this.
Yeah, and I'll give you an anecdote. Is when I was working with junior hires as a teacher, English teacher, I had a sixth grader who had no phonics skills. She couldn't read, but God bless her, she really wanted to read, and she was not functional at even grade level. And so your heart goes out to these kids, but you're absolutely correct. By third grade, research is showing that that's really the critical stage where these kids need to be at level, which is why these NAEP scores, they evaluate third graders. Fourth graders, but it's after third grade, right? So the key here is that we have to let me back up a step. All that money that we've been spending the last couple of years, we could have done a greater impact for these younger kids by funneling that into reading and math services, right? Tutoring, extra teachers, et cetera. But instead, that money was spent how?
Yes.
And I think that's another piece that we need to investigate. And we at Parents Defending Ed are investigating those type of things. But this is troubling. But at the same time, I think we need to start looking at solutions and move forward.
It's also a really unfortunate piece of emphasis on how vile the COVID lockdowns were. These were not good for kids. It was really bad, and it set a lot of people back very far. And the consequences here are going to be lifelong, Rhyen.
Yeah, my wife is also a teacher, and the school district that she was in, they were in lockdown for well over a year. Even the following school year of 2021, and this was a low socioeconomic urban school district. So some of our neediest kids, a district that right now has a 10% proficiency rate, and those kids were in lockdown for over a year. And so that it was really something. I mean, I don't want to just blame that. Of course, it's a big culprit, right?
Yeah.
But we've seen from the 90s that these scores, since they've been collecting these scores, that this has been an ongoing issue. And so I think it's great that we're having this conversation for unfortunate reasons.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. That's exactly right. Well, Rhyen Staley, I have to thank you for joining us today and your great organization, Parents Defending Education. Really nice to talk to you. Thank you for your help today.
Thank you, Vince. Appreciate it.
Rhyen Staley, researcher over at Parents Defending Education. As President Trump banishes all of these Marxist programs from being taught in the schools, hey, no more federal funding for you if that continues.